anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuit!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Blurson at Blurnsville.
Futurama.
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is Star Trek Picard, brought to you by the good people at CBS All Access, Secret Hideout, Weed Road Pictures, Escapist Fare, Roddenberry Entertainment, and CBS Television Studios. I am joined by 5 of 9, David Wright. How are you, sir?
I am functioning within acceptable parameters.
Outstanding. And also joining us tonight, fresh from his most recent review of The Crown with yours truly, from our Canadian office, he's here to make it so. It's Andrew Graham. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Mark. We are the Canadian Borg. You will be assimilated. We apologize for the inconvenience.
Well done, sir.
The most feared battle cry in all of human history. We are so sorry.
So I think this is the first time I've had you both on a Star Trek show. Did one of you do the Long Road to Ruin Spock trilogy with me?
It would have been Andrew, because I was in Japan at the time.
I did not, no. Okay,
that was somebody else then. That might have, I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody else. It was somebody not Sean. So we'll open up with just real quick. Dave, you first. How long you been a Star Trek fan? What brought you to Star Trek? And when you heard they were doing a Picard series, did you shake your head in dismay, or were you so excited?
Geez, I can't tell you when I first got into Star Trek. It's just kind of been there for as long as I can remember. But yeah, longtime Star Trek fan. What brought me to Star Trek? Cool spaceships for starters.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of interesting stories, and then kind of got a bit more into liking this sort of optimistic view of the future. I mean, I couldn't put it into words at the time, but just this kind of idea of things are going to keep getting better and better. And, wouldn't it be cool to be there?
Did you watch did you start with TNG, or did you start with the 60s show or something else?
It's probably mostly TNG. I did watch some of the original series when I was a kid, but, a lot of it I found to be kind of scary.
Really?
At the time. There are some, legitimate horror episodes in the original series. I actually learned most of it because I think when I was in junior high school, my dad bought me a novelization of the original series. So it's every chapter of the book was an episode, but just written in a novel format. So that kind of got me up to speed on a lot of the stories. It was actually more the TOS movies that I think I kind of really got into. It was the TOS movies and probably TNG, and then eventually I got into Deep Space Nine, then onto Voyager, and I just kind of fell off during early season 1 Enterprise.
Gotcha.
And I've kind of been stumbling around since then. As for your second question about how did I feel about Picard, well, when Patrick Stewart went up at TrekCom and said Jean-Luc Picard is back, I was like, yes, and then I saw Alex Kurtzman standing behind him, and I said, no!
That seems to be the consensus. What about you, Andrew? Tell me your history of Star Trek.
Very similar to Dave, lifelong Trekker. Really grew up on, starting with TNG and going forward from there. One of my formative childhood memories was 1994 when Next Gen actually finale'd. My uncle took me to the Skydome. No, I am not calling it the Rogers Center, to go watch the finale on the Jumbotron they had there.
You watched the finale of a television show in a football stadium?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
so much more fun than watching football.
Yeah, because what did they do? They also did a top however many episodes, so it ended up being Best of Both Worlds, and Best of Both Worlds they did Yesterday's Enterprise. I can't remember if they did the third one or not. They did the special finale summary, and then they did the finale. Then I went on, watched all of Deep Space Nine, watched all of Voyager, watched probably 3/4 of Enterprise, including that god-awful finale, and then...
I think that was more an episode of TNG, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. The background episode for a pretty good TNG episode that killed Enterprise pretty completely. And then I have not had a chance to watch Discovery yet, but in terms of hearing that Picard was coming back, I'm like, woohoo!
So, I was a kid when Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan came out, and I think that was my first exposure to anything Star Trek, was basically the Spock trilogy. I remember watching Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan when I was at home, probably saw it on cable, and I remember loving it as a child and watching it like on repeat. I may or may not have seen The Search for Spock in theaters. I know I saw The Voyage Home in theaters with my dad. We saw The Final Frontier and The Undiscovered Country in theaters, and then I think as I watched the movies, I went back and watched some of the old 60s shows. When TNG was on, my dad and I would watch that together, and I'm pretty sure I watched that straight through. Deep Space Nine, I was kind of in and out of when they turned up the dial and the Klingons started attacking and they were at war with the Dominion. Yeah, that's when I really started. That became appointment viewing for me. As I told Jesse when we discussed the comic, I tried to watch Voyager. It was too UPN for me, and I was like, yeah, fuck this. Every other episode, Janeway was trying to crash the ship, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with you. And then I just refused to watch Enterprise. So, also a lifelong Trek fan. Just real quick, because this will lead into our discussion of Nemesis, which is sort of the setup to this television show. What did you guys think of the series of TNG movies? Did you like most of them? Were they kind of kumsi kumsa for you? Do you have a favorite, Dave?
Yeah, I enjoyed the TNG movies. Like, those were the only Star Trek movies I actually got to see in the theater. Yeah, overall, I think I kind of liked all of them. Nemesis may be a bit shaky, but I didn't hate it. Mm-hmm. It has its ups and downs, but whenever I get to putting together that Star Trek retrospective, we'll probably talk in more detail about them. I mean, the favorite, do you even have to ask?
First Contact?
Of course.
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
Yeah.
But then again, I also think Generations and really most of the TNG movies are like hot garbage. Andrew, your thoughts on the TNG movies?
Yeah, I'll just go through them one by one. Generations was pretty good. Probably a bit underwhelming for how much they upsold it with the whole Picard-Kirk team up. Introduced some interesting concepts. It was kind of probably an underwhelming way to send out the Enterprise D. First Contact, no more to be said. Complete classic. Probably one of the best in the series. My personal three are probably that. Probably Undiscovered Country, because that was the first one I saw in theaters, and I actually think that holds up as a really good kind of tension, mystery, kind of almost a Hunt for Red October style movie. And then Wrath of Khan.
Yeah. If we're looking at the total scope of Star Trek movies, it's Wrath of Khan, First Contact, and
Undiscovered Country.
Yeah, I'd have to say Undiscovered Country, but I have such a place in my heart for The Search for Spock, because I know a lot of people either hate it or just think it's very good. But John Larroquette, you promised to kill me, I'll kill you later. I have had enough of you, as he's punching the one Klingon.
Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah. Bring me Genesis. There's so many fun lines from that movie that I still quote to this day. Though one of my favorite quotable lines from Star Trek, and I do this at work all the time, people don't know that I'm doing Star Trek though, is I'll go, "We need breathing room, Hitler, 1938," and then I run out of the room.
Okay, quick aside, General Chang is my instructor Jay Cooper's favorite Klingon. He is
good choice.
His favorite line for that entire movie is "Cry havoc." And let the dogs of war. That's the name of the studio in first.
I'd pay real money if he'd shut up. So good. Yeah, Undiscovered Country is a great movie. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The rest of the movies really quick. Insurrection. That one's okay. I mean, it's not spectacular. I think it's probably the best two-parter that was never part of season 8.
Yeah, it's a textbook extended episode movie.
And then Nemesis was just kind of it was all over the place. Like it kind of. I think part of the problem was that it's also the last time you saw any of the next gen cast, and really, it's the last time we touched on new Star Trek. And when was Nemesis?
2002.
6 years.
It was the year I'm looking at is 2002.
Oh wow! So 18 years was the last time we actually touched new Trek.
Right.
In terms of moving the timeline forward, I mean, Dave and I have talked about this, but I mean, a quick sidebar on that one is, I think one of the problems that Star Trek's had over the last 18 years is that they really haven't been willing to move forward the timeline at all. But
yeah.
I'd like to point out our collective self-restraint at none of us breaking into a Bane impersonation, the reference of Tom Hardy playing Shinzon and Nemesis.
God, I rewatched Nemesis after finishing up Picard the other day, just because I referenced it so many times, and I looked at him like, oh my God, is that Tom Hardy? He's so skinny. Ugh.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, two of my standby movies that I think of are like Black Hawk Down and the series Band of Brothers, and Tom Hardy's in that.
That's right. Yes, he is.
I mean, the Harley Quinn series is kind of redefined peak Bane. Or do I mean Bang?
Hang on, my son has joined the podcast. Hi, Jonas. What do you think of Star Trek?
I never seen the movie, but Daddy,
What?
I didn't know I eat dinner, so I'm still hungry.
We'll go get a snack.
Okay. Well, I didn't eat dinner, but
Okay, Jonas.
I was so wishing he would just say it's a bunch of nerds.
Star Trek. Why don't you people get laid or something? He's 6. He's not going to say that. Anyway.
Yeah. I can dream, Mark. It would have been comedy gold.
It would have been. Okay, so let's sort of bridge the gap between Nemesis, which plays a role in this. We should probably touch on Star Trek 2009, because that's the one where they blow Romulus up, and then we get the whole.
Or I thought it was like
reset.
the universe or the galaxy. Seriously, every single iteration, that supernova changes.
Yeah. So just real quick, Nemesis. That's the one where Data dies, and
Yep.
I'm gonna ask you guys this question. Let's just address the elephant in the room with regards to this, because a big part of the Picard series deals with Picard living a life after Data's death, and I don't think maybe there's survivor's guilt there, but there's definitely some sort of an emotional attachment to Data. And I watched the Red Letter Media reviews of Picard once I was done with the series. And one of the things that Mike brought up was how, this is why I want to get your opinion on this, that this love that he has for Data, and and that's not even me being reading into it or being sarcastic. He outright says it in the finale, that the love that he has for Data is a wholesale invention for this show that didn't actually happen in the series. Their connection was really formed in the movies, and it was more it came out more because they were the two top stars, so they got a lot of screen time, and therefore a relationship was built around that. But there was no basis for it in the series itself. Dave, what do you think about all that?
First off, FYI, I think the lead writer for Nemesis was a big friend of Brett Spiner's. That probably answers a lot of questions right off the top there.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so first I'll say, the whole idea of love. I mean, love cannot. It's there's more than one type of love. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a romantic love. that Picard feels for Data. So to all the people who are just going gay out there, tone it down, okay? Anyway, as they always point out as well on the Red Letter Media commentaries, the very end of TNG, the end of All Good Things, it's, Picard finally comes and joins the poker game. And so they do kind of plant that seed that, this is sort of Picard becoming a bit more personally involved with at least his bridge officers.
Right.
Yeah, but then again, we do get the TNG movies, which take place after that, and Picard never seems to be really buddy-buddy with anyone. I think, he maybe cares about Data, maybe counts him as a friend. He certainly respects Data a lot. But, you never really get that sense that these two have, a very deep relationship that approaches love. And, I think to kind of have that, this is kind of one of those famous unearned moments which Star Trek Discovery is full of, where, you have this great, explosion of a scene of great emotion and gravitas, and then you're like, where the heck did this come from?
Yeah.
And...
Go ahead.
So it's kind of I think, he was a dear friend. I'm sad that he died, especially, sacrificing himself to save the ship and, the Federation, so on and so forth. But, I don't really see it becoming this sort of all-consuming thing in his life that he can't escape this moment. He's dreaming about Data constantly and, needs to tell him he loves him and stuff like that. That does not feel like Picard. He does have emotions, but he's very reserved, and not many people kind of get to see him take off that shield and let them see the gooey center of the man.
Even, and I'll go to you next, Andrew, but even without having seen the RLM commentaries on Picard, what I remember of Picard from TNG was the two closest people to him were Beverly Crusher and Guinan. The stuff that I remember about Data was mostly between him and Geordi. I don't recall there being a relationship really between Data and Picard, other than he was one of the officers on the bridge. But weigh in here, Andrew. Do you think that? Would you agree that this was sort of wholly invented for the show out of whole cloth, or do you think that they might have been building on something from TNG that we're missing?
I think it's interesting. Actually, Dave brought up a point I was going to bring up regarding the end of All Good Things. By the way, all-time great sci-fi finale. But I don't think it's entirely invented out of whole cloth. I kind of felt it was somewhat organic in some ways. And I think part of it goes to kind of the arc of Picard and the arc of Data. There were some great scenes throughout the entire series of Picard and Data interacting. I can't remember the name of the episode, but when Data's other daughter, Lol, came to be, there were some great discussions there. I think on some level, Picard, in terms of if you wanted to peg Data with a best friend, then that would definitely be Geordi. But on the other hand, I think the relationship between Picard and Data was unique because I think as you saw Picard evolve, he started from a place, and whether that be actually character intent or he was just written very stiffly, which he very well was, somebody who was very reserved, very closed off, kind of interacting with another person in Data whom is automatically closed off but wants to go the other way and explores humanity more. I think that that's one element of it. I think the other side of it is when you look at the consequence and the end of Nemesis, Data very literally saved Picard at the last minute. So, I think there's definitely an element there of survivor's guilt. There's an element of kind of that unpaid debt. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I think of as soon as we talk about this whole conversation of love, and maybe I'm bringing it up because, Patrick Stewart is so Shakespearean. He is currently reading sonnets every day on Facebook, which is awesome. but I go back to that whole line from St. Crispin's Day speech, which is "He who bleeds today beside me shall be my brother." So that's kind of the way I read it. And I mean, I think even when we get when we talk about episode 7, Nepenthe, we kind of see a little bit more of that discussion of like brotherhood between him and Riker.
So let's dig into this. We have 10 episodes that debuted between January 23rd and March 26th. And it's 20 years after the conclusion of Nemesis, as well as the supernova that takes out Romulus, that set the timeline change in motion from the original Chris Pine Star Trek movie and from 2009. Picard, for those, and the comic book Countdown recounts why there's 2 Romulans living with him in his chateau in France, but you don't really need to know it. They're just there. They kind of owe him a debt. They're taking care of him. They're making wine. It's all fine. So he's living there, and we are introduced to another character who is Issa Briones' character, Daj, who will also be Soji and later on Sutra. We meet her. She's, in short order, attacked by assassins. Her boyfriend's killed, and she is quote-unquote activated. She seeks out Picard. She's starting to have visions or memories that she can't fully place, and Picard goes to help her. She dies shortly thereafter, and I forget how he jumps to this, but at some point after she passes or she gets killed, he realizes that there's this twin out there, and that these twins are Data's quote-unquote daughters, and he feels obligated to help her because of his relationship with Data. That's kind of the gist of the show.
Yeah, they're biological robots, which is kind of like saying clones, that are somehow cloned from his robot DNA. And you always, when you clone robot DNA, apparently you always get 2 clones.
Yeah.
Because reasons.
Yeah. So, Dave, what you're saying is that there are many copies and they have a plan.
Yeah.
Look, there was a lot of cockamamie in this show, but I was willing to accept cockamamie because at this point, this iteration of Star Trek is less science fiction and more science fantasy, and there's certainly a lot of cockamamie in fantasy. So it's like, I just want to enjoy the show. I don't want to tear this to pieces.
Also, if you're going to like kidnap someone who can be activated and turn into like a kung fu master killer robot, why don't you wait until they're asleep, then use your transporter to take them from where they are to a secure location where you can restrain them and then do your evil things.
Because then we won't get a cool fight scene, Dave.
And that is basically all of New Star Trek summed up in one discussion.
Yeah. So where I was going with this, as an impetus to the show, which is basically Picard has to find the daughter of Data and get her to the thing. The bad guys think she's a monster and going to destroy the world, and they sort of knit a story around that. So as bones to the story, what did you think of this idea, David, of Picard feeling like he owed like this life debt to Data by making sure his daughter, quote unquote, was safe and got to where it was she needed to go?
I thought it was okay as like an inciting incident. Like as much as I think the whole Picard Data relationship was somewhat overblown in this, I could still see Picard wanting there's this person in danger, she needs help, I'm gonna go save her to sort of pay my spiritual debt to the man that saved me. That's fine. That's decent motivation. I'm not really gonna throw any shade there.
Andrew, what did you think of this relationship between Picard and, let's skip right to Soji because that's the main part of it.
In terms of that relationship, I actually thought it was really good, and I think a lot of that weight was carried by obviously Patrick Stewart and Isa Briones, who really, I don't think I'd seen her in anything else, and she's got some talent given. She was able to hang with Patrick Stewart in a lot of scenes. She played two characters very convincingly. And at the end of the series, the version of, I can't remember what the song is now, she's the one singing that at the end.
Oh, is she? Okay.
Yeah, she was on her resume, she's actually on the touring cast for Hamilton.
Yes, I did read that. Yeah, she's a talented enough actress, certainly a pretty gal.
Can I actually comment on one other quick thing?
Sure, absolutely.
Just you touched on it. It was something I was thinking about too. Was the whole idea of this is Star Trek more as science fantasy than science fiction? I think I tend to agree with you on that. I'd probably say if there's anywhere where this, maybe to skip ahead to my review of it, if there's anywhere where this series falls down, I think it's on the overarching storyline. I think it's on some of the mechanics they use to get there. I think a lot of the stuff they play with in this series in terms of destiny and prophecy and things like that just don't do it for me in Star Trek. I'll even say this, like, I was a big fan of Deep Space Nine. I thought that was a great series. I think that's a really good example of when you start to apply quote-unquote destiny to Star Trek, where it starts to fall down a little bit.
Yeah, this is not where I go for my... I prefer science fiction as, Dave and I reviewed the Lost in Space series. And one of the things that we like about Lost in Space and what we've talked about in 2 season reviews is they are presented with a problem. There is a dramatic hurdle that they have to overcome. But they have to overcome it with some degree of science, either science based in reality or science based in this fictional world that they've created. Either way, they are problem solving using some form of science. Another one that we talked about was the movie The Martian, which, like it or hate it, Matt Damon has to overcome the hurdles that he's encountered by problem solving. He can't punch his way out of it. And I much prefer that kind of, I much prefer that in my science shows, my space shows, than this sort of thing where it becomes, this becomes their version of trying to do Star Wars, where there's myth and religion and fantastical elements. And we accept that with Star Wars because that's what it's always been. It's harder for me to buy into it with Star Trek when I'm so used to what I've seen in TNG, just as an example. I mean, Deep Space Nine didn't do that as much, but Deep Space Nine had a very functional issue. We are alone on the other side of the universe. We are, gatekeepers of this wormhole, and there is an inherent issue with this wormhole and those on either side of it that they are having to contend with. And there is where the drama is. So, like, theirs was more of a situational, if you follow my meaning, theirs was more of a situational show, and their situation is what produced the tension and the drama. So I was okay with it not being very science-oriented. But I thought TNG was, if I remember correctly.
It was, but I think the flip side of also Star Trek is that Star Trek has always been about, on some level, and I'm not trying to say this with the guy jumping out of the corner and yelling message, but Star Trek has always also had that social element to it, where it's talking about, it's using the fantastic to explore the real.
Sure. And
again, that's Deep Space Nine was really good at that. I mean, in the Pale Moonlight, I can't remember the other one where Sisko remembers himself as a writer, which was great. But I mean, Star Trek's always kind of had that element to it, and I think they tried to, in the individual moments of this show where they tried to work that in, it was okay. But again, they weren't. The series definitely has a little bit of ADHD when it comes to kind of keeping on track with what it wants to say about what.
Yeah, this show, and David, you can speak to this if you want. This show definitely had an agenda. Part of the setup that's knitted around the bones of this thing was that you had a situation where they were trying to evacuate the Romulans from their empire because their empire was about to be destroyed by a supernova.
Well, planet.
They kept saying it was the whole empire was about to go. We'll go with planet just for the sake of argument. But
for Star Trek 6, one moon blows up, the entire thing nearly collapses.
They were trying to evacuate, billions and billions of people, and the Romulans didn't trust the Federation.
It was 900 million, actually.
Oh, damn it.
Hey, I didn't write the numbers, the writers wrote the numbers.
Inherent in all of that, you had this thing where, like, that alone, because I might be conflating some of this with the comic, because the comic talked about, the Romulans don't trust the Federation. They think this is just an opportunity for the Federation to spy on the Romulans, and the Federation's like, you fucking idiots. We're just trying to get you to safety. Stop being obstinate. But also with this, and this is a major point of the show, is synthetics are sort of kind of like mutants were the stand-in for homosexuals in Marvel Comics. You have the synthetics are the stand-in for whatever the latest group of people we don't like is. And the Romulans basically sabotage the synthetics so that they'll go off and commit a terrorist act so that everyone will then hate the synthetics and they'll ban them. And this is how we'll get rid of these things because the Romulans think synthetics are going to destroy the universe. And, inherent in all of that is and some of the critics actually lauded the show for this. Just thought like, there's really good parallels to modern socio-political culture. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, please, you have the floor.
Okay. Oh boy, there's so much to cover in this space here. Well, I'd like to I would have liked to have started this discussion by sort of reading out sort of the introduction to actually IGN's initial review of Star Trek Picard, because that really kind of sets the stage good for sort of where I was coming into this and sort of what I was looking for. So if you'll bear with me, I'm totally plagiarizing IGN's article here. So we start off with a quote from the end of TNG, All Good Things, from Q. That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence. So the article goes on. With those words, Patrick Stewart's final adventure as Captain Picard on Star Trek The Next Generation culminated as the all-powerful being Q imparted a lesson to his on-again, off-again frenemy. The final frontier, that's the Star Trek concept and catchphrase, is as old as the franchise itself, is about more than just exploring outer space, brave new worlds, and all of the rest of it. It is also the investigation of the human interior, of what it is that makes us tick, and of what untold wonders of our continued evolution as a species has in store for us. So now, as Stewart returns to the small screen in the unlikely yet somehow also inevitable Star Trek Picard, one must ask, has John Luke taken Q's lesson to heart in the 26 years since that encounter, or more specifically, have the writers and producers of the new show done so? So the short answer to that is no. But that sort of gets into, as much as we just talked about, the technical scientific solutions, which actually are probably like the worst episodes in Star Trek, where it's just, the quantum singularity is producing 18 millicochranes of time decay. It's like, well, fire a modulated polaron burst through the main deflector dish and the secondary EPS relay into it.
Dave, you forgot to reverse the polarity.
That's more TOS. Modulated polaron burst is kind of like what the hip kids were doing at the time, but yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's just technobabble. That doesn't mean anything. Lost in Space can get away with it. It's like, we need to get our ship across the ocean and we can't fly. Let's put sails on it.
love that episode. Yep. Shut up.
Yeah, I wasn't mocking the Lost in Space. I was just saying, that's kind of how one of the reasons why it works. Whereas, in Star Trek, it's just gobbledygook. It's technobabble. Like in the scripts, they would just write the words tech anytime. Sir, the tech is teching with the tech. Oh, well, tech the tech and fire it into the tech. And then they just had like a couple of guys who just write science-y words into it that they felt make sense.
Right.
So when you think of like the major episodes of Star Trek, the episodes that really stick with you, it's more of a human storyline. Like they're imparting some sort of a moral or a lesson into the show, and they're kind of exploring this all through using these alien civilizations they meet as sort of metaphors for more current events. And in Picard, they've sort of tried to like, well, let's do all that to us, but without any direction. And so, like you start off into the show, and sure, like they are laying the groundwork for dealing with some issues. Like we have, Picard being interviewed by the agenda-driven, hot catchphrase, media that's sort of out to splatter him. You have the whole oppression of the synths, even though all the synths we see don't seem to actually have any personality to be oppressed for. You are trying to set up some sort of refugee border crossing type story, maybe, and in the end it's just discrimination bad. Because discrimination bad. And like they kind of have this stuff that it's kind of there, but it doesn't really go anywhere. They're not really saying anything with it. They're not diving into the issues.
Yeah, it's Hollywood deep, to where and for those people that don't know what I mean by Hollywood deep is when you have these people who think that they're really putting substance into their fictional show, but it's as shallow and as like straightforward and dumbed down as you can possibly get.
And so my biggest worry going into Picard was that they would show these issues really without any nuance. Like my issue is not with what their position on these issues are, but they should at least try and explore the issues. Like for example, I listening to your review of the Orville talking about Bortus and Clyden's daughter.
Right.
How in their society, all their children are male, and if you're born female, you are immediately basically transitioned into a male at birth. So obviously we're going for like a transgender narrative here. And of course, I'm pretty sure that Seth MacFarlane plans that at the end, that child is going to find out, I was born a girl, I want to be a girl, that's who I am, so on and so forth. It's going to be a trans-positive message. So, but, in a lesser show, it would just be like, transphobia bad, trans good, trans everything, trans.
Yeah.
But in this, we have, Clyden saying, hey, I was born female, and they transitioned me to male, and I'm totally cool with that. Like, I think that has made my life better.
Not only but they acknowledge that, and I don't want to get off on a whole Orville tangent because Jesse and I covered it pretty extensively, but just as an aside, one of the things they acknowledged on the show, which I thought was pretty brave of them considering the climate, is that you may not agree with another culture's culture, but that's just it. It's another culture's culture, and there comes a point where you don't get a say anymore.
Yeah, I mean, moral relativism has, its limits, in my opinion. But I'm trying not to get too deep into politics here. But they go to the Moclan homeworld, and it's like, well, this is the way that our society has been able to survive. Yeah, who are we to change that? Just because of some feelings or a different set of beliefs.
Right.
And now again, I am sure that in the end, the trans narrative is going to win, and that's perfectly fine. But it makes it all that more impactful that they have thrown these legitimate hurdles along the way for them to answer to and to discuss. Like listening to you talk about, like you were thinking about this. You're like, it was engaging your mind. And that is so much more valuable than just, this good, this bad, because we know better.
Yeah, who would have thought Seth MacFarlane does Star Trek better than Star Trek does?
Yeah, exactly. But But on the bright side, at least with Picard, the issues lacked so much nuance that they were basically not even there.
Andrew, did you want to tag in here?
Plot convenience.
One more time.
I said they were almost there for plot convenience in some level. Like, I mean, and I think that goes to the larger part of the problems with the series. They couldn't quite focus on what they wanted to do. Was this a show about the synths, which they got rid of pretty quickly? And for those of you keeping score on the Kurtzman-Orci chart of plot points, false flag operation.
Yeah, or Orci is here in spirit.
So
I wonder if we'll Skybeam later.
let me just we can push.
Sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, Andrew.
But is it about the Borg? Is it about the Romulans? What is it about? I mean, this again goes back to my earlier point about kind of feeling about Star Trek as a whole, about leaving the future of the future alone for 18 years and trying to revisit all of that in one go.
So I made this comment to a friend of mine. We were talking about this through a Google chat, and I said, I feel like the pre-production of this show, when they were mapping it out, and it was like, okay, let's start from the premise of we have this service, we need to sell it to people. Everything else on CBS All Access is utterly worthless. So let's make something out of Star Trek. People will gravitate towards it. All right, what do people like in Star Trek? They like Jean-Luc Picard. There's lots of memes of him on Facebook.
Earl Grey tea.
Hang on, I'm getting there. They like Picard. They liked him in the movies. Let's do a show about him. Okay, what do they like about Picard? Make it so, engage, Earl Grey tea, Borg, Locutus, 7 of 9. That has nothing to do with Picard. No, but they like it because Jerry Ryan's hot. Okay, what else do they like about Jean-Luc Picard? Sassy black women. Got it. We have enough for a show now. Oh, and Data. Like, that was it. Like, they just made a list of stuff loosely or directly associated to Picard. It was like, let's make a show out of this hash that we just created. And that's kind of how the show feels. Yeah,
I mean, just before we continue, as much as I've ragged on Picard for kind of having pointless messaging set up in it, and at least it actually tries to do messaging, pointless though it may be, which puts it, light years ahead of Discovery, where there's basically no point whatsoever. So, spoiler alert for my final thoughts, it doesn't get, the award for best, but it gets most improved.
Fair enough. So there's two kind of parallel plot lines going on in the beginning, and then when one of those when those plot lines sort of come together, a new one sort of gets invented to finish off the show. We have Picard sort of gathering...
I think you're being copied, not invented, but we'll get to that.
We have Picard gathering his samurais as he proceeds to go into the cold of space to go look for Soji. And then we have Soji's storyline where she is... I'm getting there. Where she is transfixed, hit upon, falls in love for no good reason with Harry Treadaway's Narek, who's a Romulan who turns out is actually spying on her and setting her up, blah, blah, yakety schmackety. Kind of related to all of that is there are different sleeper agents and spies throughout the Federation that are all engaged in this plot to find the daughter of Data, who they have determined is the Destroyer, find the home world of the Destroyer, and kill everybody. So we follow Soji, who's on a... And again, this sort of bleeds into this other thing. We have Soji, who is working on a Borg cube. And they are... Part of what's happening on this Borg cube is they are...
Whatever it is.
Yeah. They are healing, reclaiming former Borg. They are... de-assimilating them and rehabilitating them. So there's that whole thing, and then there's the Picard gathering up his samurai as he proceeds to fly out into space. So let's tackle both of these. I'm going to start with you first, Andrew, because we haven't heard a tremendous amount from you in the past 10 minutes or so. Talk a little bit about the Picard part of it, the first couple of episodes where he's getting his shit together and heading out into the characters that he associates with, and then talk a little bit about Soji's storyline, as it were, for the first half of the show.
Sure thing. So, I mean, the first... It's definitely kind of an interesting place where, again, they start out with Picard of being this kind of almost hermit-like character where he's kind of become disassociated from Starfleet and shows some bitterness about it. I'm sorry, I got to call this out. There's no way in hell that is a French winery that he lives on. That's in Napa.
Okay.
That all said, I've got to say, I think probably the most enjoyable part of probably the first 3 episodes, the fourth episode drags a little bit, but out of it, I think it's kind of running into some of these characters, and I mean, like, I think I've enjoyed the main cast quite a bit. Like, I mean, and I know you've kind of poked fun at it, but or actually, here we'll start with someplace else. But starting with the winery itself, like I think
it's a vineyard technically.
Sorry,
I think it's a vineyard technically.
Vineyard, sorry.
Yeah.
Like Laris and Jabon, I actually love both of those characters. I could have definitely stood to have them in a few more episodes. They've just got this. It's kind of interesting getting some additional time with the Romulans because they've always been kind of the very dry-witted black hats on Star Trek, and having a chance to have them without a little bit of their bluster is actually quite a bit of fun because they have this kind of very Spartan sense of humor that appeals to me. Then moving out from that, I mean, you get the chance to go out there and understand where Picard's come relative to where his place is in Starfleet. In there, obviously, there are some people who think that he's this great guy. There's a clerk that can't remember him, and there's at least some of his former colleagues who just thinks he's got some sheer fucking hubris. I mean, along the way, then we get a chance to meet Raffi, who, and I know, as you call her, the black woman, Mark, I actually kind of enjoyed this character. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to see, Picard form a new relationship with somebody on a professional level within Starfleet, and to also see a character who gets burned by Starfleet on some level and kind of fall apart a little bit because of it. By the way, conspiracy theorist, there's another one on your Kurtzman Orchie checklist.
Let me jump in here real quick. I didn't feel like the relationship between Picard and Raffi on the show was earned at all. They have the one scene that goes to why she has so much resentment towards him. That I'm fine with. But she's like calling him JL. And again, this might be because I also read the comic. They were active in Starfleet. She's on the mission with him when he's trying to relocate the Romulan refugees. And she was calling him JL then, too. And I'm like, that's awfully familiar for an officer in Starfleet when you're dealing with who's at the time an acting admiral. And it really bugged me.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I actually just came across this as a quick side bit. There's a deleted scene from the end of Nemesis where the new XO comes on after Riker leaves, and Riker decides to dick with him a little bit and says, you know what Picard really enjoys? Being called by his first name. and it's with character actor Stephen Culp. Go look that up. It's really funny. But, yeah, again, this kind of goes to the problem of they didn't have quite enough time they didn't have focus to develop what they wanted to develop.
They had time.
Sorry?
That they had time. They just decided to make a pizza instead.
See, I like that episode, but anyway. On the flip side of it, we get some other, I'd say, some pretty interesting characters. I think Chris Rios, I thought, was a lot of fun between both himself and then all of his various emergency plot device holograms with various accents, which I thought was quite a bit of fun to kind of work around. Alison Pill, who I've liked since Days on the Newsroom, I think she was really good as kind of this very much a space neophyte. We get to see somebody on Star Trek who's not spacefaring, and seems to maybe be even a little bit afraid of it, which I think is kind of an interesting way to play somebody. And then I think I have to call it one of the
2 words.
because
Reginald Barclay.
Sorry?
2 words. Reginald Barclay.
That's fair, but he was also more of a transporter phobe.
Yep, still phobe.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I have to bring up one more character just because I have a great nickname for him, and that is Elnor, who we shall now refer to as Romulan Legolas.
Yeah.
Yep,
that was definitely like a pre-production writing meeting. And like, we need another character for this. We need somebody. Look, Patrick Stewart's 900 years old. We can't have him doing too much action. We're going to hurt him like they hurt Harrison Ford on the set of Star Wars. Okay, what do we need here? I don't know. People like samurais. Fine. We'll throw a samurai in there. We'll say he's Romulan. Write it up.
And we'll give him hair like Legolas.
Yes.
And have him trained by warrior nuns. That's bizarre.
Yeah, which was kind of a thing which kind of, and this gets down to the deep well of nerdy Star Trek stuff, but it's like, Romulans have never been shown as being particularly religious, so suddenly showing that they have both a set of nuns and then also, basically a death cult is kind of it's kind of a leap for me in a lot of ways.
Just as a sidebar, so if I could have the attention of all writers on new Star Trek, please stop writing religions and cultures. You are terrible at it. just stop. You are adding nothing. In fact, you are taking away. Say again?
Can I add a secondary call to this?
Please.
This goes to all TV writers everywhere. I'm looking particularly at you guys on Walking Dead. Everybody, please, if you have a large ensemble cast, stop breaking them up for half the season.
I mean, I know, like, the whole Romulan thing is, like, they're secretive, which is fine, because, Klingons, they like war. They're big into battle and honor. So battle and honor, is in all forms in all of Klingon society. You talk to a Klingon lawyer, it's like, oh, but trial is just another form of battle. But, make it so, like, oh, Romulans have 2 names. Our public name and our secret name. It's like, oh, come on!
I actually thought that the detail about the door was kind of fun.
The door? Like,
there was something about Romulan houses all have front doors, but no one actually uses them.
Right.
Okay.
They're more or less there's a facade, and I mean, given that what we know about the Romulans, it actually makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I think you could. There might even be some cultures on Earth that do. I'll give them that one.
Anyway, and yeah, I mean, maybe just moving on the Soji storyline. Yeah, that definitely dragged a little bit more particularly with Narek kind of hanging on. I'd say probably the highlight of that story was really getting to see Jonathan Del Arco return as the character Hugh, who was developed in the episode of I, Borg and came back for, I can't remember what the second 2-parter was, but I thought it was really cool to see him come back and get some screen time as kind of a, this XB that is now going on to try and help other, assimilated persons reintegrate into society. I mean, I think the story there was that basically the Federation was, for whatever reason, trying to just help the people who were Borg, and the Romulans were basically mining the cube for tech, which, if I remember, there's something written out there about the Naruto. Is it the Naruto from the
Narada? Yeah.
Narada? Yeah, the Narada is built on Borg tech or something like that, if I remember right.
Yeah. But then again, that comic also said that B4 turned into Data and became captain of the Enterprise. So
yeah, we're getting lost continuity here.
Yeah, I mean, again, like for me, anything in a comic, like I haven't read the prequel comic to this, is like it should only be supplementary information. If I need to read your tie-in comic so I can actually understand what the heck is happening in your show, you should have put that in the show.
And if I need to play Fortnite to find out the Emperor's coming back, I shouldn't need to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or if you need to ride a roller coaster to understand part of a movie.
Yeah, like there's this saying that we've said many times in screenwriting, show don't tell. Well, I have a new one for the new generation of screenwriters: show don't guess.
And to go back to what I was saying about the Raffi Musker character, the show doesn't do a good enough job of establishing their relationship when they were in Starfleet. Because when we see them, I could have done with a little less pillow talk between Narek and Soji, and a little more, tell me who Musika and Picard are to each other. Show me them in their element. Not when everything fell apart and she fucking hates him now.
I mean, they must not have been that close, because apparently she's not important enough for Picard not to ask for help.
But that's the thing, there was they have the one flashback, and that's all you get of their relationship. Because they had to make time to do, that's the problem. The show's called Picard, and not that he doesn't get enough screen time, so much as the narrative is split between his journey and Soji's journey, and Soji is elevated to being, as equal, if not more important than Picard is during the show. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but I felt like this was the Soji show, not necessarily Picard, especially after the first couple of episodes.
Well, it's kind of the Siri problem, from The Witcher, in that, these characters have to meet at the end, but we still need to have, we can't just, shove that all into, the last couple of episodes. We sort of need to have, them parallel each other.
Yeah. And, I think going to that point really quick, I think that's a valid point with how much time we spend with Soji and stuff like that. I also think that, again, going back to how good Isa Brunez is in this show, if it was a lesser actress, that could have been really grating. I'm a big fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but if you think of Skye in the first couple of seasons, she could be really irritating.
Sure. Yeah, she was a very bratty character. And they gave her a lot. There's going to be a S.H.I.E.L.D. show. Cool. With Nick Fury? No, the dead guy from the Avengers. Okay. Well, we like Greg Clark. He's fine. Okay, but he's not really the focus. This other broad is. Ugh. I get why people threw their hands up with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It got better as the series went on.
Oh yeah. When they pulled the swerve when Winter Soldier happened, that is one of the all-time great swerves on serialized TV.
Mm-hmm. Oh, when they had to deal with the fact that everybody was Hydra.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. There's a portion of that show that I tuned out of and then kind of picked back up right before Age of Ultron. So I think that section of it, I gave up. That doesn't matter. Well, maybe if we end up actually talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when that finally goes off the air, we can revisit that conversation. Just know there are parts of it I didn't bother with. Anyway, moving this along, David, is there anything else you want to add to kind of the first half here as we're getting Picard up and running and we're getting to know Soji?
Yeah, there's one episode that I really wanted to get some issues off my chest with.
And that would be
baby. Yeah, and that would be Absolute Candor.
Okay.
Yep.
Or as I thought after I watched it, absolute crap.
Bleh.
Yeah, this episode really messed with me. I can see why people quit after this point, because it is a mess. I know, Andrew, you were telling me that this is sort of the low point of the show. The worst insult I can give is this episode was Discovery bad. And so, to get into it is, Romulan warrior nuns, that's bizarre, for starters. I'm not sure what they were thinking of adding that in. But the whole setup for the situation was just a complete mess. We're shown this colony where everything's good, and then apparently once the synth attack happens, they stop helping them or something. It's confusing because all this time we've been told, again, haven't read the Countdown comic, or whatever it's called. We are told that the Federation, the sun is exploding. Romulus is going to be destroyed. The Federation are trying to assemble this rescue armada together to go and rescue all the people to evacuate Romulus. To a new location. And now apparently we're also doing another planet, and we've already done the evacuation fleet for this planet, but there's also the evacuation fleet being built in the shipyards, and now that fleet has blowed up because of the robot attack, and now they don't have the ships that they were building to finish the evacuation that they had already done to the planet that was not going to be blown up by the star that is exploding to destroy the other planet. And it's just like what was going on here in this?
They wanted to do an Old West episode. That's what was going on.
Yeah, well, I think they wanted their Space Mexico episode. I think that's what it was supposed to be. and then like
welcome to Interstellar Tijuana.
Basically, they compete with Cantina. Yeah, with like no gringos sign, even though there aren't any on the planet. But let's get to that later. So you have this setup where I'm like, well, what happened here? Like, why are they angry? Like, they had a colony, and you even see like the flashbacks to the colony, and like they've got like these floating drones going around. Looks like they're putting up some like nice condos or townhouses. Like, things seem pretty good. And now Picard goes back like 20 years later, and it's just a shit pit. And it's like, well, when did this happen? People are saying, oh, well, they didn't get any advanced technology. They had flying drone thingies. Flying drone thingies. You probably already have like industrial replicators. And Picard goes to this cantina on this planet that, as near as we can tell, is entirely settled by Romulans, but for some reason they decided that they're going to put a no humans sign on the front of the bar, and then he takes that down, steps on it, stunning and brave, sits down, seems a bit miffed how at the racist Romulan bar, that's racist, I guess, species against humans, they don't want to serve him, and then we get this senator who's like, you have underestimated the ingenuity and the resilience of the Romulan people. Well, then why does your planet suck? Like the Federation builds lots of colonies. They have colonies all over the place. I'm pretty sure like they know how to settle a planet. Give them a couple of old replicators.
That was an odd line. It was, you've underestimated the ingenuity of the Romulan people. Okay, so out of spite. So what you're saying is the Federation helped you instead of letting you help yourself. So you, like a petulant child, sat on the stool and said, well, fine, we'll just do nothing then. You just do it all for us.
Yeah, and then, on top of all that, we now have this Romulan warlord character that we never see, who apparently flies around in an old TOS-era Romulan ship, because if they used an actual Romulan warbird, they'd be annihilated in the fight at the end of the episode that they need for the trailer. Nobody wants to pay someone to design a new ship. They had no money. So let's use an old TOS like warbird design. Yeah, that'll work. And then he's there for no reason whatsoever. I mean, here's a thought, guys. How about after the Federation goes all xenophobic for reasons, and withdraws from the area, this like local strongman comes in and starts, holding the settlement at gunpoint, demanding that they use all their industrial capability to give him stuff, or he'll blow up their settlement from orbit. And that's why it's kind of crappy now, and that's why they're all upset. And then Picard can do like a Seven Samurai thing of fixing this problem a bit, because like this episode actually has the best line of the entire show in it. And I think it's a really great line, and I wish they had done so much more with it, because this would have been the part where like you could have made, new Trek for the modern era. And the line is, I sacrificed the good on the altar of the perfect. And like, what a great concept, because how many times do we hear people complaining, oh, the world isn't perfect, we're doomed. It's like, yeah, but like if you look at it, this is like the best time in the world to be human. I mean, Corona's kind of messed that up a bit, but life expectancy is at an all-time high. Wealth for people across the board is at an all-time high. I mean, it's getting better. Infant mortality all-time low. Deaths in war all-time low. Violent crime all-time low. Like, if you look at the at the statistics, we're living in like the best time for our species on this planet in all of known history, and yet you have people going like, the world's coming to an end. Like everything's bad, all people are terrible, everything's a disaster, and it's just this all gloom, and it's just like, we could just, try and maybe make the world a little bit better, try and solve problems as much as we can, instead of maybe, going up in front of a bunch of people and screaming out, how dare you? So, like, that I thought was a really great idea. And, like, having Picard kind of going, like, yeah, like, instead of just giving up because I couldn't get all the fleet I wanted, to just try and do what I could have with the position I had, that would have been better, the better choice. And, you could have had Picard working with, the ship's crew to try and, do one little thing that might help, like maybe the planetary defense grid is broken, and hey, we can fix that, and then we'll just use the ship to lure in the warlord ship, and then we'll lure him into the planetary defense grid. He thinks it's turned off, but then we turned it on, and boom, his ship explodes, and thank you, Picard, you helped us out. It's like, oh yes, but it's going to be very tough for you to rebuild. It's like, don't worry, Picard, don't underestimate Romulan ingenuity and resolve. And that would have been like a good, solid episode of Star Trek, and they just pissed it all away because they couldn't bother with coherent storytelling. I did think Eleanor was kind of fun, though.
It's always fun to have a samurai to do fun action stuff.
Yeah, it's also like, they have this philosophy of absolute candor. They say exactly what they're feeling. Well, in that case, pretty much the comment section of every site on the internet is full of geniuses.
The other thing, I'm going to let Andrew come in here because he sounds like he has a lot to say about this. But
okay, I'm done. I just had to get that off. I've been stewing about that since I saw the episode. So, have at it.
Let me just say this: Eleanor does have a great gimmick line, which is "Please choose to." Huh?
You said Eleanor. That was funny.
What's his actual name?
Eleanor. It's like Elrond, but not liable.
Romulan like less.
Elnor has a really great gimmick line, which I'm going to find a way to like jury rig into conversations I have with people, which is "Please choose to live" right before he kills you, which is right up there with my friend who used to say "I fix things," or rather, I couldn't help but notice Japan share it with me before he would kill people in D&D.
It did have a nice payoff when Narek was like, "I choose to live. I choose to live."
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. I didn't put near as much thought in this episode as Dave did. I just thought it kind of dragged a little bit.
Yeah, FYI, I did not sit and meditate on this for days. Like, this was pretty much my thoughts right after watching it, but That's my brain.
Anyway, I kind of saw where it was going with parts of that, because, if you look at, and I do not want to drag this into any sort of political discussion, but it's like, if you go into certain examples in history where people have come and brought technology and to a resettled society, then taken that away, things sometimes kind of fall apart, especially when you've got a society having kind of a loss of identity from the loss of their home world. So that all said, my other joke was that, Dave, if you want to watch some bad Trek, I invite you to watch Profit and Lace, Sub Rosa, and whatever that episode is where Janeway and Paris... Threshold, thank you.
Yeah. I actually don't mind Profit and Lace. It's certainly not Trek at its best, but yes, there absolutely is bad Trek out there. But this is just more like missed opportunities.
Sub Rosa is so bad it's not even funny. No, Code of Honor is worse.
Yeah, that one's pretty bad.
Anyway.
Well, why do they use that as like the example episode for Netflix? Like, seriously,
Code of Honor?
Yeah, like you, if you go over the like Netflix, tag for Star Trek Next Generation, they show you like the clip of like meeting Lotan from Code of Honor.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's like who thought that was a good idea?
Mark, I'm sorry, this is turning into our Star Trek therapy session.
No, I love it. Here is the thing about reviewing this. I wanted to watch the show. I wanted to talk about it with you guys. But if you were like, hey, tell me your thoughts on Picard, like, discuss it thoroughly, I'd be like, it's fine. It's, like, I think I told you guys offline, like, it's kind of convoluted. It feels like a turducken at times where they just shoved one thing into another thing into another thing. And now I'm hungry. Melissa, make me a turducken.
A turducken that was beamed up by the UNSC Protector in Galaxy Quest.
My wife is blinking at me.
It beamed up inside out.
Would you believe
exploded?
Would you believe it's almost 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday night and she won't make me a turducken? Isn't that some bullshit, Andrew?
No comment.
Anyway, so Picard feels like a turducken. It's just one cockamamie thing shoved into another cockamamie thing. And it's like, it's well enough acted. These are capable, strong actors, but the show is written where like relationships don't make sense. They don't spend time really, you use the word earned. A lot of the reactions to each other and relationships in the show are not particularly earned. The first half of it having to do with Soji, here's the thing. She's interesting when she becomes interesting halfway through after she realizes she's a robot. And she's having to deal with that. And so the episode, and I did want to spend some time on this, the episode where they go to Riker and Troy's house in the woods on a planet with a thing. Nepenthe. I think it's actually a really fun episode. I know that the RLM guys gave it crap, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorites of the series. But it's my favorite because this is the first time you actually see her dealing with her inner struggle and figuring out her identity and what it means. And you actually get to see this actress really play with this character. And up to that point, it's just a lot of... I mean, I guess the episode before that, where she's, tricked into realizing she's a robot by doing the Romulan walk thing, was okay too. But everything...
I love that they had a special room for that, and they had a guard on the door.
But everything leading up to it was like, I don't find this character... This is half the show, and I don't find anything they're doing here interesting other than the little bits of dealing with the Borg. Meanwhile, you have Picard, and, to your point about absolute candor, if you're just kind of watching and not thinking about the show, here comes Picard into, an old Mexican village dealing with racism and samurais. Well, that's fun, I guess, if you don't think hard about it. And that kind of becomes the show for a while, which is there are fun things being thrown at you that it's as if they sat around thinking, what'll tickle the sacks of Star Trek fans? Write an episode about it.
Well, sorry. Am I good to go?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Yeah,
we can be conversational. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. So there was this phrase that I have coined after watching half of Star Trek Discovery that I think kind of sums this up perfectly, and it's spectacle over substance.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was watching a YouTube channel about advice for screenplay writing, and the person they were interviewing was saying I was working on a script. Fixing up a script for some movie that he couldn't mention, and it was a summer popcorn actiony thing, and he's like, they had a character that the thing they introduced early on, that this character has a fear of heights, and then later on in the movie, all of a sudden there's this big action scene where they're riding on a tiger on the top of a mountain, fighting like a pterodactyl. and I went to the writer and said okay, you say that this person has a fear of heights, but now they're doing something incredibly dangerous in a high place with no explanation for how they got from A to B. I was oh yeah, I mean, I just thought it looked cool,
right?
And there you go. That's kind of it. Is
so I don't mind you guys getting into some of the nitty gritty nerdy stuff about Star Trek, because honestly, that's my takeaway from this whole show. It was mildly entertaining, mostly. There was one or two bits that were kind of thought-provoking and I could really dig my teeth into. And the rest of it was so convoluted. And that's kind of what I want to get to next. Because once Picard gets to her and they have the sort of timeout where she can deal with the fact that she's a robot, we're into basically the last 3 episodes. So after that is 8, 9, and 10, and it's pretty much just we got to get to her home planet. And here's where I utterly fucking lost. Someone needs to explain this to me. Maybe I'm dumb, but I got the fact that the Romulans wanted to get to her home world, and that's what they were using it for in the first place, because they thought she. Okay, if I remember correctly, I gotta think out loud at this point, and then I'll let you guys weigh in. But essentially, they needed to get to the home world because at the home world, they could contact the space robot octopus that was in a wormhole somewhere, and if the space robot octopus came out of the wormhole, everyone was gonna die. And I'm not entirely sure what that had to do with the Borg cube that the Romulans were also doing stuff with, other than Hughes' project. Andrew, my nose is bleeding and my brain is melting. Help me.
You know what, Mark? I don't think I can actually try and justify a lot of that, because this, like I said, this kind of comes around to some of the problems I have with the series. And I mean, maybe this is me getting to a macro level again, but it's like, you know, putting this out there that, you know, Soji's the destroyer and there's this other race of hyper-advanced AI that will come and destroy everybody as they have before. All of this will happen before. All of this will happen again. Sorry, I'm crossing over the Battlestar right now. But it doesn't hold together very well. And I mean, I think I tried to think of this to myself about describing Picard on the whole. It's less than the sum of its parts in some ways, because there are some episodes here I absolutely love, and there are the overarching work of it doesn't hold together in some places, but bits and pieces of work here absolutely save it, and we'll probably get to that once we get to episode 10, but I think there's an interesting conflict that comes up once they get to, is it Coppelius? Yeah, Coppelius is the homeworld. They get into some interesting conflicts there about the whole idea, and I think that's one of the stronger pieces where they start talking about this whole idea of Soji having a choice about what to do next, and Picard's move to sacrifice and things like that, but it doesn't hold together in a lot of ways.
Yeah, It felt a lot like, well, because the plot says so. Because otherwise, you're left with the story that basically goes, Data, they were able to mine enough information from something of Data's to create new Data robots. And one of those Data robots was eventually going to call Space Cthulhu out of a... Yay!
Yeah, Robo Cthulhu.
It's fucking Space Cthulhu out of the wormhole. And it became like, well, she could call Space Cthulhu or she couldn't. And therein lies the drama. And and I think when it got to that point, I was like, I just want this fucking show to end. Just get this over with.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Mark, about what the Borg cube has to do with the home planet, nothing at all.
Good.
That was it. But to kind of help you retrace from point A to epsilon there, the idea is, so the Jadvash, the Romulan secret society that seeks to destroy all synthetic life, artificial intelligence, despite like holograms already having artificial intelligence to that level, and it already been established that Romulans did research sentient or robot life, but anyway, let's just not get into that. I just had to point it out. So they want to find Soji's home planet so they can, because they think there are more robots there, so they need to blow up all the robots. And so Soji's like, they know where it is, so we need to get there first and warn them. They get there first, and then everyone's like, oh, what the heck is this all about? And so, what was the character's name? Alice, the scientist, blonde character. Agnes, I was close. Yeah. So Agnes, she mind melded with security chief O, who was like a secret Jadvash agent in Starfleet, who showed her like the horrors of when the Reapers come. I'm going to call them that because we know what you did, writers. We know what you did.
I was about to say, you weren't the first one to make the comment about this being a ripoff of Mass Effect.
Oh, yeah, that is, yeah, so blatantly obvious. There are no points at all for noticing it. So Agnes got that information from O when she unconsensually mind melded with her, and then we meet Sutra, like Dash is kind of like the Dash before Dash and Soji. She mind melds with Agnes despite not having like the organs necessary to do a mind meld because she's not a Vulcan, but whatever. And then she's like, oh, I get it now. So apparently there was this like super ancient civilization that invented AI robots, and the robots went crazy, Skynet, and there was a big war, blah 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 blah. So to sort of warn future civilizations, they moved 8 stars into one solar system, which is like super rare, putting a planet in the middle of them, and they left their copy of Mass Effect there. Yeah, I mean, sidebar, like I was kind of wondering, like up to this point, like maybe that was just like an anti-AI art exhibition that they thought was like a warning for the future. You know, it's like there's like this is like, you know, Elon Musk on Joe Rogan that they just like downloaded and it made them all crazy. Yeah, and now they're, you know, because you could think that, like, you know, future civilization, like, you know, finding like leftovers from our civilization and like watching some sort of media and thinking, oh man, this must have been real, holy smokes, whereas really it was just like entertainment or art or something. But I digress. Anyway, in this case it's real. So yeah, apparently they have this sort of beacon thingy that people touch. It drives most of them mad. They like try and kill themselves. But this reveals the truth that there's like super ancient AI, super advanced robots that have set up like a system where, like, if any robot calls them on this frequency, they will come and wipe out all organic life in the universe. It's the only way to make sure. So for some reason, the Zhat Vash think that this is a bad thing to allow to happen, and the safe bet would be to like stop AIs from getting to the point where they think maybe the push button to exterminate all organic life, you know, is a good idea. So that's kind of what's going, and then it becomes, well, maybe we should push the button because then we won't have anything to worry about. And then this is where you get Picard going, we must not give in to fear. Yes, but you've already tried to wipe us out once. I understand what you're saying, but we must not give in to fear. There's an invading fleet heading our way in a Borg cube. I understand what you're saying, but hear me when I say you must not give in to shut up, Picard. It was a chicken and egg scenario. It's like they're trying to kill us because they're afraid that we're going to kill all of them, so we're going to kill all of them to stop them from killing us because they're afraid that we're going to kill all of them.
Yeah, this is again 2 5-year-olds outside going, I have a force field. Well, I have a lightsaber that disables your force field. Go ahead, Andrew. You were starting to say something.
Even that goes back to this whole thing about, you know, having the synth attack and then them just disappearing for the rest of the series. There's no connection between that and what happens at the end of the show. And yeah, like, again, it just goes back to this whole thing that, like you said, I mean, it's a little bit of, to use a historic phrase from this series of podcasts, it's a little bit of more dinosaurs, where they said, what are the things that people like about Star Trek? Let's put all those in there and go forward. And in some cases, those things really work. Like, I actually, complete side note, we don't have to get into this in detail, I really like what they did with Seven in this. Kind of a change in her character given some of her experiences. The beginning of episode 5 is heartbreaking, and she gets a badass fight scene at the end, and we're all happy.
Yeah, I thought they would do more with her when she plugged into the Borg ship. I felt like that was a lost opportunity because, like,
they had no money.
Well, damn it,
they needed something. They needed something cool for the trailer, but they had no money.
You stepped all over my joke, you bastard.
Sorry,
I was going to say, like, they had this whole thing planned out with Jerry Ryan, and they were going to do the Borg, and they were like, okay, but we don't have the budget for this. What do we have the budget for? I don't know. A bunch of barely visible figures being thrown out of an airlock.
By the way, Borg drones can survive in this vacuum of space.
Yeah, stop distracting us with knowledge.
Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, but like, if this is like the one where like they actually tried to dive into like canon and continuity and try to like be part of it, unlike Discovery. So yeah, like, it's all on the table, guys.
Okay,
yeah, Paul Yakutas. They've written 4 books about the continuity and technology of Star Trek and chronology. God knows, I used to own them.
Yeah,
right.
Like I'm sure if you like offered them money, they might come and like give you a few pointers.
So,
just a quick side note: love
yes.
the Borg group design. Actually, I actually really like the sort of the newer look for the Borg cube and technology. It seems a lot more sort of slick and advanced as opposed to like a kit bash of whatever they had at the time.
Sure.
Though I did find it weird that they have the technology to have like transporters that can go anywhere in like the universe, yet they never thought to use them for like taking over the universe.
All right, so I talked about Nepenthe, and we've sort of touched on episodes 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to let you guys sort of close this out here. First, if you want to talk at all about the Riker-Troy episode, I've kind of said my piece about it, just to kind of reiterate. What worked, I enjoyed seeing our friends from TNG in this, Riker and Troy. I thought their kid was fun. I like the fact that they spent time in that episode with Soji trying to figure out who she is, her relationship to Picard, who she should trust. I thought that was all really handled well. I know there have been some criticisms that it's a very slow episode when not a lot happens, but I think you need that in a series at times. I think sometimes you just need to slow the show down and let characters be still on screen and act, and let there be relationships. You can't always have fighting. So that's kind of my take on that. So if you guys want to talk about that, that's fine. And then I've said all I'm going to say about the last 3 episodes. It's it seems like there's a handful of ways you can end a show, and one of them is big ass war. And they were like, yeah, that one. But what if we did it with flowers? Sure. Space flowers. Got it.
Jeez, the stupidity. That was such a bad idea.
So I'm going to go to Andrew, sort of your thoughts on Nepenthe, the last 3 episodes, final thoughts. Kind of take me through things that you want to say that we haven't gotten to yet. And then we'll go to David, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, Nepenthe, I think I'm pretty much aligned with you. I thought it was a fantastic episode. Great work by Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes coming back as Troy and Riker. Kestra, who is actually named after, that's a callback to I want to say episode called Dark Mirror, where we find out that Troy had a younger sister or an older sister who had died, named after her, and then the Riker son who had died, Thad, was named after one of Riker's ancestors, so a little bit of fan service there, but I thought that was great. I thought the strength of the acting in that episode and the chemistry between Troy and Riker and Picard were really, really good. I think on some level I kind of read that as a little bit more of maybe a bleed over of the actors and the characters together, but I think I just enjoyed the hell of it, and I think you're right. It was a nice breather. It was a good chance to kind of orient Soji to where she was. I think we kind of went through all the mechanics of the last 3 episodes. I thought I mentioned this before that Isa Browns was great as Sutra, trying to kind of play the slightly evil version. Unfortunately, I think this series only seems to have either whiny or super schemy black hat villains, and O kind of goes that way. I think Narissa is that, and just whiny is Narek. I think we can dispense with him for the next season without much happiness, without much loss. I will say the thing that I thoroughly enjoyed out of the finale was as much as it turned into a fake out, I thought the final scenes between Picard and Data were absolutely pitch perfect. I thought it was a really good way to kind of close out that character properly. I always thought that the death that Data was given in Nemesis was a little bit short for such a great character. And I absolutely loved it. I'm fine with Picard being temporarily reincarnated into a synthetic body, just with mortality still attached. That whole thing was kind of killed by the fact they had already announced season 2.
Right.
One of those things where you kind of incidentally kill your momentum on that one from a storytelling point of view. I will say that when they first started that scene with Picard interacting with Data, it's like, God damn it. John Delancey's about to show up, isn't he? I honestly thought they were about to go. It's like, this is Q, because that's the only way you could explain Picard having dreams, randomly finding this person, and everything going that way to turn into a Q storyline. And honestly, I mean, I know there's people who don't love Q, but I think he's a great character and has derived a lot of great Star Trek stories.
Who doesn't like Q? That's crazy talk.
There's a very Star Trek-based series of podcasts called The Greatest Generation, The Greatest Discovery. Two of their least favorite characters are Loxana Troy and Q. So they did all the 7 seasons of Next Gen, and they were always trying to veto each other, and it would always be over either a Q episode or a Loxana episode.
I mean, Loxana episode's a pretty safe bet, but there's good and bad Q, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sort of stealing a bit from SF Debris here, but it's the sort of bad Q, in my opinion, is like where he's just a sort of like troublesome imp, just making
basically Mitchellplex.
Yeah, he's just like making trouble for the sake of making trouble. But then you have like the good Q episodes, which is where he's more like trying to show them something, like that quote at the end of the show. Like, it's him sort of like guiding them through like the bigger universe, like Tapestry, one of my all-time favorite episodes. Just yeah, like what if you could go back in time and redo something that you regret, and then discovering that, well, at the time, yeah, you regretted it, but that became an important part of like the person you became, and like that would just completely change your life, and maybe not for the better. Like that is like peak Star Trek there. No space battles, no phasers, no crazy aliens, just like a good story about what it is to be human. I'm sorry, Andrew, did I cut you off there?
No, that was pretty much it for me.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I mean, yeah, I've kind of come down more negatively on the show, but, also Andrew, you liked it a lot more than me in a way. I'll address that in just a minute here. So, yeah, I'm kind of taking that position here. But, like, overall, yes. The acting, really good. I cannot complain about any of the acting craft of anyone involved in this. Any of the problems were, like, character writing issues, such as in the case with, forget her name, but, as I like to call her, incest sister.
Narissa.
Where it's just like, I'm evil, and I probably want to have sex with my brother. Yeah. Like, I mean, scenery chewing, mustache twirling, black hat villain, yep, 10 out of 10, but as far as, like, interesting character that added to the show, no. Once again, she was unceremoniously killed by a lack of health and safety regulations.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
As I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about things, do you think the problem with modern Star Trek is that it suffers from the producers not having faith that modern Star Trek will find an audience, so they try to make it appeal to what they feel is a mass audience? And again, there are certain things that just can't exist in a niche anymore. Even though the long tail of media consumption is real, I think there are certain properties, certain IP out there where executives and producers look at it and go, we realize it's a niche property, but it's too important to us, and there's too much money on the table for us to aim it towards that niche audience, so we have to make this broad appeal, and in doing so, it loses its identity. Because I feel like that's Star Trek right now.
Short answer is yes. I mean, if you actually take the time to read the opening credits, there are 18 producers on this show. like seriously, over half the credits is just producer credits.
Right.
It's like, I'm wondering, I guess I know where all that money went now. So, yeah, like, I think some of it's too many cooks in the kitchen. Like, as much as I tend to bash the writers a lot, Kurtzman deservedly so, like, I almost wonder if, like, they have so many notes coming at them and so many ideas that, yeah, they can't really pick a direction and go in it. Like,
it gets poochified.
Yeah, there's like this ancient proverb, a man that tries to travel in too many directions ends up going nowhere. So yeah, it sort of seems like, oh, we should have warrior nuns, and we should address this issue. I'm making Rich Evans finger gestures right now, and you're like, but the fans want to see this character, and Game of Thrones is popular, so we should have an incest relationship. The people love that, let's kill this character suddenly. That worked in Game of Thrones too. And, without kind of really understanding that, Game of Thrones was that kind of show where it's like the surprise of, like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming, whereas that's not really Star Trek. Like, Star Trek, it's popular, but it's not super popular. It is not the entertainment for the masses.
Right.
That's Tiger King. But, but like, Star Trek, like, the people that love Star Trek love Star Trek. Like, you can even just hear it in the conversations we had about how deep down the well we can go with this stuff. And once you have someone that loves Star Trek, if you make Star Trek that they love, they will throw money at you. They will buy the DVDs, they will go to the conventions, merchandise all over the place, build the models, buy the games. Like, there is money to be mined from this. But it's not going. You're never going to get Star Trek to like the most popular thing in the world. And if you just kind of accept that and it's like, well, let's just try and make good Star Trek that people who like Star Trek will embrace, then, you're going to do good there. And, and while I don't think Picard has hit that point yet, and I'm not going to be like, this wasn't the best Star Trek ever, therefore it sucks. Even Star Trek hasn't always been the best Star Trek ever. Like, we have that advantage of, those episodes existing and we remember them fondly. But yeah, who goes back and rewatches Sub Rosa?
Here's what I'll tell you, Dave. Having watched Lost in Space and reviewed it with you and watched this, I preferred Lost in Space. And I think that's kind of where I am with the series. And I'm going to let Andrew kind of weigh in here, and then we'll flip back to you for the last word, the very last word. But, again, Jesse and I reviewed Krypton, both seasons of that, and one of the comments we made, like, there were some interesting things about it, but we both kind of recognized that they were desperately trying to get a mass audience with a very, 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 very niche product. And it dumbed it down to the point where, not that it was unwatchable, but it wasn't very interesting. And it's just, you could tell they were trying, but they were trying in like, oh, we know what's popular. Lobo's popular. Okay, are you going to do anything interesting with them? No! All right. So,
so they can put them in the trailer.
Right. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, they write shows that make good trailers, but when you actually sit down and watch the show, you're like, meh. And I saw the Picard trailer when it debuted, and it looked pretty amazing. And I watched the show, and it's like, this is kind of a nothing show. And before Andrew, unsubscribes to the network and says, damn you, Radulich, let me say this. It's not that it wasn't entertaining. Bubblegum pop, science fantasy, fun show with good actors, sure. A show that kind of is provocative, and because of the nature of this podcast, I have watched lots of television, and so I just finished Ozark. I watched this. I watched His Darkest Materials, and there are some outstanding series out there. Really thought-provoking, amazing, well-acted, well-written, straightforward shows. So when you get one that's just kind of meh, it's like, sure, it's entertaining, but so's porn. But it doesn't really stay with me. And once again, I have related something to pornography. Welcome to the Radulich Broadcasting Network, Andrew Graham.
Take a drink.
Alrighty. Go ahead.
Sure thing. Anyway, it's an interesting point you brought up about kind of the whole how we got here on this, and I think you hit a lot of really good points. I mean, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen in this one. I think going back to some of my comments, there's a lot of really good episodes. There's a lot of really good ideas. If they distilled that to maybe 3 or 4, then this thing could have been and really worked them out. Then that could have been really great. and really tightened up the storylines a little bit. But I think when you look at the kind of collective history of Star Trek, that there is a lot of, and I think you're right. It's this weird franchise because it is very niche, but it's also very, and it's in the zeitgeist, but it's not necessarily. Everyone knows what Star Trek is, but not everybody's a Star Trek fan.
Yes.
In the zeitgeist, but it isn't necessarily a money maker.
And half the people think Star Trek is Star Wars, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's always been kind of this weird battle over the soul of what Star Trek is. Dave, you've seen this. I think you've seen this. Mark, if you haven't, go check out a series called, or a one-episode TV piece called Chaos on the Bridge.
Yes. Highly recommended.
Because this talks about the first couple of seasons of Next Gen and how absolutely chaotic it was because nobody could quite agree what Next Gen should be. And I mean, I think you've kind of gone through that. I mean, there's been also recently within the last year, there's a great documentary that came out that was basically fan-funded called Those Left Behind on Deep Space Nine. And there's always been this debate over what is Star Trek versus what isn't Star Trek. Is it too cerebral? Is it too conflicted? Is it too dirty? Is it too real? Is it not utopian enough? You mentioned it earlier, but when we started to see Voyager transition over to UPN, does it get too UPN? Same thing with Enterprise. And I mean, are they, one of the guys as a kind of sci-fi writer I really admire is Ron Moore, who worked a lot on Deep Space Nine, and then basically was so turned off by working on Voyager, he basically immediately left and said, fuck it, get me some Cylons.
Nice.
And it's just this really bizarre, it is this bizarre thing of trying to manage how to deal with Star Trek. Especially since I think on some level it used to be a lot easier for one sci-fi show to come with pretty good effects and make some money and be profitable. And now you're on the flip side where you need to have the special effects, but every TV show can have almost movie-level effects, and now your budgets are out of control for something that may not make that money back.
Right.
So it's kind of it's a tough nut to crack.
And I think to that point, and then I'll give it to Dave for the last word, the last word. When you're talking about out-of-control budgets, there's a bean counter, there's an executive going, well, then you really do... Here's a bunch of notes of what's popular. You better put this in your show because this has to make money. And then I think the integrity of the show, I think it's a rare gem to where they can work in, like the marvelization of something where you can hit the right notes to get mass appeal while still maintaining the integrity of the product you're trying to put out. I think it can be done. Marvel has done it. But I think it's not as easy as people think. Just ask the good folks at Warner Brothers. David?
It's organic.
No, I'll say, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, you're completely right. It's kind of organic. It's kind of luck-based. Like, I mean, Deep Space Nine was kind of as good as it was because as soon as Voyager came on, as much as they were kind of the victims of that, they were also... People didn't look at them near as much, and they were able to do some really cool stuff with it. Speaking of Warner Brothers, probably one of the most successful things they've ever done was Batman the Animated Series, and that's because Warner Brothers said, I don't care, I want a Batman show, draw it on black construction paper, I don't know, 20 years later we've got the entire DCAU.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things I said to Jesse about Deep Space Nine, and I feel like you can apply this to a lot of Star Trek, which is, hey, we have this show. Well, it's really thoughtful and slow and interesting and like, okay, well, nobody's watching. Fuck it, make Klingons attack the space thing then. And like, oh, well, that was really successful. Like, the Klingons attacking the space station was, bumped our ratings. Okay, we'll keep having people attack the space station then until the series ends. It was like...
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's not really Star Trek, but that's what... But again, that's what... it's like, I say this a lot at work. I said I have two patron saints that I pray to. I pray to the patron saint, Natalie Merchant, and I say, give the people give them what they want. It's a 10,000 Maniacs joke, everybody. And just as an aside, and apropos of nothing we've been talking about, the other patron saint I pray to is Ivan Drago. If he dies, he dies.
Sorry, I gotta make one more quick point here. Even on Star Trek, I mean, that's a really good point with this series, like 7 of 9. Mm-hmm. 7 of 9 was brought on for basically the silver cat suit. And then the writers actually started working with her a little bit and said, hey, there's some interesting stuff that we can do with this character. She kind of, for all intents and purposes, became Voyager's Data and turned it into something really interesting by the end of Voyager that they were able to kind of capitalize on here. But that's kind of a good unintended consequence.
Yeah, no, Jerry Ryan was totally brought on this show because, as people can recall, the audience for Voyager was mostly men with no pants on. And they were like, oh, well, hang on, Jerry Ryan's actually not a bad actress. David, I've teased it and teased it and teased it. We're ready to go. Hit me with the last word, and then we can get out of here.
That's fine. I know I'm talking quite a bit on this one, so happy to get out of the way for a bit. Yeah, I mean, look, as much as I think I'm somewhat hard on the new crew sort of running Star Trek, and yeah, like, in all fairness to them, this is a really tough job. Like, Star Trek is very unique in how it is written and how it has worked. And, it takes a bit of, like, trying to understand that. But that is also what has made it so special, that it is, still continued on for this amount of time. And, yeah, even if, like, for some strange reason, Viacom CBS, like, called me up tomorrow and said, we want to put you in charge of Star Trek, I'd be like, yes, and, oh, crap. How am I going to do this? Like, it is hard. It is hard to come up with, like, things and ideas that have not already been done in Star Trek. And, try to figure out, how we can make more without it just being, a rehash of what has been done before. You do need to evolve the show into something new. Yeah, whilst also keeping what has made it so special. So, I mean, I will give them that. That being said, if someone is being paid, millions of dollars to shepherd this because apparently they are an experienced and talented person, like you expect performance out of that. You sign on the dotted line, you should be up to the challenge. So, and some of this is like I want Star Trek to be good. I want it to be something that I will love, for forever. And sort of like with Picard, like I would sort of say, like, as much as it greatly improves on Discovery. Like they've gone from, well, we don't really care about canon or continuity. We just want to write good stories. Problem is they don't seem to write good stories. So now they've kind of got, oh, okay, we're gonna like really tie into the continuity now, and like there's a lot of things they get right. There's some things that they miss, but hey, like 20 years of TV shows to watch, I can't blame them for not getting every little little bit right.
It's just like Lucasfilm. There's there was really no other literature or or anything else for them to delve into for Star Wars lore.
Yeah, we had nothing to base this on.
Right.
Okay, other than like an entire universe of books and video games and comics, but mind you, I hear a lot of those are not very good, but I digress. Yeah. So yeah, man, I lost my place there for a second. What was I on about? Okay. Help me pick this up, guys.
It was just something about the general continuity of...
Right, yes, thank you. Yeah, continuity with Picard. So they've kind of embraced that now, which, good. You've taken a step forward. So now they kind of need to start working with, like, how can we tell good stories, with all of this? And like in the case of Picard, I think they really should have like maybe shortened up some of the episodes towards the end. Where they did have like very sort of long, slow episodes, and maybe do a bit more of like prequel stuff to this at the beginning. Show us, Picard dealing with the evacuation of Romulus. Show us 7 of 9 going from Borg reclaiming her humanity, very sciencey person, to, murderous vigilante.
Can't remember, and the quick knee-jerk response would be like, oh, Arrow. but that's actually not what I was thinking of. There's another show where, Orange is the New Black, where they would break the narrative to do a flashback to give you background on the character.
Yeah,
and it kept floating, and that became a staple of the series. I would have more preferred that, Again, not necessarily the Arrow thing where it's like a season long parallel storyline of what happened before and what has happened currently, or what it became, what happens in the future, and then what's happened currently. But I would have liked, as you said, I think you're both right. I think two things could have happened. One, we needed more background on some of these characters. We needed more backstory. We just needed more stuff in between Nemesis and Episode 1. And then,
again, I'm talking like 1 or 2 hours, like a TV movie.
And then I think Andrew's absolutely right. As far as ideas for this show, this needed editing. This badly needed editing.
And
1 or 2 ideas, follow up on that, make the rest of the show about relationships, and occasionally show a ninja fight.
Yeah, like 7 of 9. Jerry Ryan did a great job playing this new character that they wrote for her that apparently used to be 7 of 9.
But, some time spent on what she's been doing would have been really good. All right, guys.
Yeah,
we've been at this. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just a couple more things. I'm almost there, I promise.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, like the design work on the show, trying to hide how small the budget was pretty good. But I still noticed that Riker was on the Discovery Bridge. You recycle that set. I caught you. But yeah, I think with the nostalgia, that's really what the show leans on for its best moments. It's seeing Picard with Data again, Picard with Riker and Troy again, Picard getting on a spaceship again and shouting "engage," and the camera pans around the ship, plays the old theme, and they go off on their adventure. That's all great. It's wonderful. The problem is, if you were to take this exact same story and just rewrite it so all the Star Trek-y continuity things are gone, it's just the generic sort of characters in this story, you would pretty much have a forgettable sci-fi movie of the week.
Yeah.
And and that's sort of what they need to get beyond. It's whereas if you take a classic episode of Star Trek, like one of the good ones, you could probably take that and get rid of the characters and the continuity and just tell that story generically, and it would still hit its mark. You could do Tapestry without the continuity. You could do Yesterday's Enterprise without the continuity. Best of Both Worlds, maybe a bit shakier there, but there's still this story there about Riker, or this the number 2 man, having to step in to replace the captain, and they don't want to. Stuff like that. And I think one of the things that would really help them is to go back to a more episodic format. Because when you have 10 episodes to kind of have an overarching plot that's supposed to get somewhere, you have to make sure it gets there. Whereas, and if you do it great, then fantastic. You've done a great job. If you've done terrible, then you have just wasted 10 episodes on this. Whereas if you had just spent 1 or 2, 3 episodes on one story, if it works, fantastic. If not, better luck next time. So
I think that's actually a really brilliant point. Is that they tried to do the chapters in a book style of television, and I think even though this wasn't all dropped at once, it was weekly. They know that television, I watched it all in a day basically. Television habits are people binge things all at once instead of doing appointment television. It's just the nature of how we watch television has changed over the last couple of years because of streaming. So there's more of an incentive, I think, for writers to do chapters in a book as opposed to Adventure of the Week. And I actually think that the Adventure of the Week might have served this better, as opposed because I like what you said there. You're essentially gambling that your story is strong enough to carry an entire 10-episode arc, as opposed to the idea of you want to see what this character does next. What kind of craziness do they get into in the next episode?
Yeah, because like my wife and I, we've been watching through TNG, and we already did Deep Space Nine, and like those episodes, there is no fat on those stories. They get right to it. Every scene in that episode is there to do something in service of the plot or the characters.
Right.
Yeah. So my final thoughts here. We're almost at the end, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me. So Star Trek Picard, there are things that it does good. There are things that it does really good. There are some great moments in this show. There's some nice payoffs to things that have been set up previously, and a couple of little, gems in there for the diehard fans to kind of, enjoy finding. But there's also a lot of contrivance, some really, nonsensical plotting, things that come out of nowhere, and things that are left hanging and never explained that can really detract from the enjoyment of the story. Where instead of thinking about what's going on, you're kind of going, well, wait a minute, why is that happening? That doesn't make any sense. And I think your enjoyment of this show is how much you can, enjoy one without getting obsessed over the other. Like, Andrew, you've really enjoyed the highs very much, that's where you live in this show. Whereas me, I can't get over all the issues and the problems to be able to enjoy those moments to the fullest. So it kind of, the lows balance out the highs, and it just kind of ends up being kind of okay for me.
And then there's me who just wanted to get high while watching it.
Yeah, I wasn't that bad. And, and I just, I really do hope that this shows a lot of progress since Discovery into making Star Trek again. And I'm really hopeful that whatever they do next, I mean, who knows with what's going on behind the scenes with, CBS, Viacom, but I'm hoping that if they are able to make the next one better, like they made this better from Discovery, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there pretty close, and I'm hoping for the best there. But
the next step is they're gonna get bought by Disney and do a crossover with Star Wars.
That could go either way. I mean, Star Wars is a whole other topic, but yeah, that's kind of my
Picard's going to show up on The Mandalorian.
Make it so. This is the way.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so anyone else? I think I have spoken. Oh, darn, that was a Star Wars quote.
It's got to figure out that was Nick Nolte.
Yes.
Yep.
I have spoken. We can do another crossover. We can go end of line. Huh?
Oh, super nerd points.
There we go. That's what I like.
I fight for the users.
All right. Tomorrow, speaking of users, myself and Robert Winfrey will be reviewing the first half of the new Nightwish album. It's called Human Nature. We're gonna review the human side because the second half of it is basically like an ambient nature soundtrack. So. Thursday, myself and Jesse Starcher making a one-time appearance. He will be reviewing the third season of Ozark. Next week, myself and Alexis Hana will review the Golden Compass graphic novel. Then we'll review His Dark Materials, the first season on HBO. I will do a review of the Black Dahlia murder, Verminous. And then myself and Sean Comer will be doing an on-trial for the Golden Compass movie. So that's what we got. Last week, speaking of Sean Comer and David Wright, we all reviewed the first two seasons of Agretzko. Myself and Jesse reviewed Testament Titans of Creation, and myself and Pat Mullen reviewed The Big Show Show. So Andrew Graham, what do you got going on in your world?
Well, I'm certainly just spending a lot of time at home, primarily. There's obviously not a lot going on with everything going on in the world. If I were training, I'd be training at Esteemed Martial Arts and Havoc JKD here in Calgary. If I may, my instructor Jay Cooper is actually running his own podcast right now called The Baying of the Hound. So you can find him on Facebook, also on iTunes and on Anchor. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would like to plug at this point. No, that's about it.
Okay. I don't think we have you on anything in the near future. I'm sure if something tickles your fancy, you'll let me know.
Yeah, Sean and I are chatting about some stuff right now. Maybe doing a Long Road to Ruin video games edition.
Yes, I look forward to that if you guys ever get that done. I can plug this in November, Veterans Day. You and I will be doing a show. Yeah, is that vague enough for you?
Yes, we'll have to figure out what we need to watch if nothing comes out this year.
Yeah. All right, David Wright. What are you? Yeah, I guess you'll be on the next Harley Quinn show, which Harley Quinn season 2 will be July 30th. Are you doing anything with me before then?
I don't think so. Just trying to get my Star Trek retrospective sorted out, which should hopefully be happening in the next month or two.
Okay. In the meantime, anything else going on with you?
Not for now. Again, we're kind of all in the same boat. We don't know what's up with the schedule for things. So once schedules are finally, brought back, we can actually, get back to reviewing movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully Top Gun will come out around Christmas time. We know you'll be on that.
December 23rd. Yeah, I will be on that no matter what.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Thank you for joining me and these two crazy knuckleheads for reviewing Star Trek Picard. For Andrew Graham and David Wright, be well, be safe, and make it so.